Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. Today we're doing two viewer requests. First, we'll be looking at a double tag Acontecimento list for viewer Ethan T, and then we'll be playing a Varuna double tag list against White Company in last launch for viewer Sneaky Snake. First, let's look at the Acontecimento list. So this list is written for viewer Ethan from the UK, who's written in that he likes watching, he watches from the UK and he loves to catch the uploads. He'd love to see a Acontecimento. He's been trying to make a double tick list work and would like to hear some advice around that. So Ethan, I may get to playing this in a battle report in future, but this is how I would start with a double tick belang Acontecimento list. The first and most important thing is you have to start with a good list name, which is why this list is called Tick Tick Boom. But moving on from that, double tick belang obviously means that you have sunk a lot of points into two pieces. Although the tick belang is a Stingray series tag and therefore size 6, which is very maneuverable, it is smaller, it's only armor 6, they are kitted out so effectively that they are still quite expensive at 68 points per model. That means that 3 SWC and 136 points of your list is already spoken for. So filling out the rest of your list means making some pretty serious compromises. Acontecimento still have plenty of cheap pieces that they can pad a list out with, but you are going to be in a situation where having enough moving parts to play if somehow both of the tick belangs get compromised is going to be challenging. So what we've done here is there are a few ways that you can build this. You have, generally speaking, about enough points for 1.5 semi-luxury elements. And I have spent my points in that case on making sure we have a hacking game, a surprisingly solid hacking game, to go after and engage enemy hackers preemptively, potentially in their deployment zones, to free up space for the tick belang. We will actually see this in the battle report that's to come, but I am of the opinion that basically every Pan-Oceanian list that is playing nominally meta Pano with solid heavy material should have some solid plan for engaging with enemy asymmetric elements like hackers dug in behind repeaters, and this list has a plan for that through hacking dominance. Other lists can and should have other plans. So to go through how I've structured it, we have the requisite 2 tick belangs. These could easily be split across 2 different groups. This list is running a fair few irregulars, but not an unconscionable number, not as many as the Varuna list that we're about to see. So I've put them both in one group so that the second combat group has the option of spending command tokens for O12 prestige. However, I think you could easily split them across the 2 groups if you wanted to split their firepower, because you will generally with this list be spending those command tokens alternatively either on turning irregular orders regular, because there are 2 irregular troops in the list. One of them is a Warcore, you'll often net rod his order regular, or by using it to reroll repair rolls with the machinist. So I think you could easily split them. I've chosen to have both tick belangs in one combat group. That's just a choice. Do what works best for you. We then have 3 Fugazi drone bots. Now I don't love this. It's 21 points for 3 orders is excellent, but Fugazi drone bots are essentially a defensive and passive element. I would rather have pieces that can fight, but this is necessary because we're running 2 tags, 2 hyper-mobile, hyper-aggressive, hyper-dangerous tags. There are trade-offs you make for that, and one of them is having to take 3 Fugazi. We've then taken a very basic regular fire team. It's just 3 regulars. We have the sapper with multi-sniper, a generic regular, and a lieutenant. That gives us our lieutenant decoy, our regular, and then our lieutenant, and then our sapper. The sapper regular is a budget value piece. It's 21 points, 1.5 SWC. It can be deployed effectively anywhere, making good use of table space. You should just about always have 1 or more sappers in the Acontecimento list. I can't afford in this list to fully link them, although if you could find 6 points, turning 2 of these Fugazi into regulars just to have the +2 ballistic skill for the regular sapper sniper might be worthwhile. I considered it a little bit of an overinvestment because I actually think this list really wants the deployment zone repeaters because we have both a regular hacker and Scylla. So Scylla is in the first combat group. She is her hacker, not her Evo version. I also think you could go both ways on this one. The reason why I haven't gone with the Evo is our plan for protecting the tick belangs is to kill enemy hackers in their DZ. It's not to just passively make the tick belangs harder to hack, it's to go after all of the threats to them. For that reason, I don't need the Evo hacker, and so I may as well have a regular hacker to do useful hacker things once we put our network out. So she's got a picture. Rounding out this combat group, we have a Tech B. Always good to have a Tech B. It's a 5-point specialist with a Flash Pulse. It'll go forward, it'll do useful things, it'll spend its irregular order. In Combat Group 2, therefore, we have a regular hacker with Combi Rifle, Grenade Launcher, and Fast Panda. So this is part 2 of our network projection. Also, to be perfectly frank, you can just spend orders in this combat group firing that grenade launcher. It's ballistic skill 12, which means it hits on 6s. If you fire 3 or 4 shots because you have nothing else to do, you'll probably score a hit. And if you score a hit, you might kill something. Just kind of value, and you can use that in a pinch to do things like go after Masai Morans if you think you can get through a network. But what this list wants to do, if there are enemy hackers on the board, is use either Scylla's Pitcher or the regular's Fast Panda to get that repeater out there, and then use Scylla's Exceptional Trinity, right? So she's got her own ECM, and you'll have the Firewall penalty, and she has Trinity +2 damage. Provided she doesn't just die, which is a thing that can happen, you could just lose the face-to-face roll, but assuming that you don't just lose the face-to-face roll, she has an excellent chance of not just winning the face-to-face roll, but putting down any hacker that she fights. If you can find the points, and it's pretty challenging to do so, you may genuinely consider, for example, cutting this Mulebot to turn things into points elsewhere. Getting a paramedic just to recover her in case she goes down could be worthwhile. So that's a potential adaptation that you can make. We then have a machinist with a Palbot. We're running two tags, 3 Fugazis, and a Peacemaker. It's worth just having the machinist, even if the Tick-Belang are likely to end up in places that you can't repair them because they're very mobile. We have a Peacemaker. Peacemakers are good, and we have some good quality hackers. The Peacemaker just presents a little bit of forward defense. A Warcore, because I like getting to 15 troops, and it's one of the only ways to do it. And then a Mulebot. The Mulebot, I am obviously it would not be in this list if we didn't have 2 models that can potentially make good use of the baggage, right? So it can reload the disposable, both the Fast Panda and the Pitcher on Scylla, and it gets us to 5 orders in the second combat group. Realistically, I think you could cut this in some cases, and that would potentially free up enough points to, for example, turn the one of these Fugazi drone bots into a regular paramedic. That would give you some redundancy to potentially paramedic Scylla back up if she goes down. So trade-offs here, we're going to have to deal with trade-offs because we're running double Tick-Belang. All in all, I think I like how this list works. It's got a lot of specialists. It's got 2 very high quality and 1 solid quality gun. It's got a hacking defense that Panasonic does not always have. Generally speaking, this is how I would run a double Tick-Belang list. I probably wouldn't run a double Tick-Belang list most of the time, but Ethan, this is how I would do it. This is what I would recommend. This list has an aggressive plan for dealing with the things that can threaten the Tick-Belang, and once your opponent's hackers are down, those Tick-Belangs can probably handle just about anything in the game, up to and including enemy heavy tags. Because they have mimetism and very high ballistic skill and very high mobility, you should be able to use and exploit that once the way is made clear for them to go after basically all of the pieces that you think you might need to. So, Ethan, this is to respond to your request on advice on how to do a double Tick-Belang list. Feel free to use it. Interested to hear how it goes for you. With that done, let's have a look at the Varuna list that we're going to be playing today. So this is the culmination of a Varuna list that I have been tooling around with for about a week, trying to incorporate multiple ideas and get right. Directly speaking, this list has been motivated by response to viewer request Sneaky Snake, who just asked if myself or Ed, if he appears on the channel in future, could just do a double tag list. And that got me thinking, got me wondering, got me trying to build out how I might do this list, and in particular answer a few questions. So what we're trying to accomplish here is, there are a few things. The first is, I want to use helots. It's been ages since I've used helots. Helots are awesome. Go helots. So let's see if we can fit 2 or 3 of them into a list. It is, after all, Varuna. From there, what I want is to tick a number of boxes. The first is, it's Panasonic with heavy material. I want a plan for dealing with enemy asymmetric elements. And 2, if possible, I want to never run out of gun. So even with the 3 helots, and they're the 0.5 SWC helots, one of the goals of this list was to have triple redundancy firepower to always be able to, if possible, force the issue on just having a good gunfight, because I'm Panasonic, and if I can't gunfight, I can get locked out of the game. And I think I've successfully answered those. So Group 1 starts with a multi-marksman Squallow. This model clocks in at only 1 SWC, 57 points. It can roll in with close assault if need be, thanks to the multi-pistol +1 burst. So it fires, it's only burst 3, but it's ballistic skill 15, tag, fast, only 57 points, and it can fight everywhere from 24 down to 0 inches. It can actually be duoed with a few different pieces, but this game I'm going to duo it with a Knight of Montesa. Knight of Montesa is a specialist. Using the Tactical Awareness Order on the Squalo to move the Montesa Knight forward can be very good. This is a very hackable duo, but it's a duo that can do a great deal. It can fight at anything from 24 down to 0, very effectively in multiple different ways, including in CC if needed. Worth noting, though, is that a very viable option is to duo the Squalo with this Kamau. What you do there is you have firepower all the way from 36 down to 0, because there's nothing wrong with just a Kamau by itself firing Burst 4, BS13, Mimetism, HMG, and it can move forward off of the Squalo. It will invariably, because the Squalo is faster than it will fall behind the Squalo, but that's fine. It's the firing at the 32-inch range band. I think pairing a Kamau and Squalo, the only problem with that as a fire team is that your only specialist is getting the dumb little Crabot out and trying to make whip 11 rolls. So in this game, we're paired with the Knight of Montesa because last launch, the scenario we'll be playing is quite specialist centric. But something to consider if you want to is that linking this or a Kamau HMG with the Squalo Mark II marksman rifle could be really cool. We then have 6 linkable models, and the intention here is for a high degree of link flexibility. So the idea is you can configure this in 2 ways. You can either have a pure 5-person Fusilier corps, 2 paramedics, 2 generic Fusiliers, one of whom is the LT, and a HMG, or you can split it into 2 3-person corps, Kamau HMG Fusilier Paramedic, Fusilier HMG Fusilier Paramedic, Fusilier Lieutenant, or having just the decoy Fusilier in that link. That gives you 2 3-person teams with a specialist, a combi rifle, and a HMG, all of them on the cheap. The only reason I would do this, so the reason why I think that's viable is that Varuna does not need to, it can, but it does not need to rely on a Fusilier core for ARO duty. It's totally serviceable. You can run a missile launcher or a sniper Fusilier as an ARO heavy piece. Given the +1 burst, the +3 ballistic skill, you can put a Feuerback Orc in there if you want to. But because Varuna has helots, and this list has 3 helots, and tags are viable ARO pieces in limited circumstances, I didn't think that this list was desperate for a Fusilier missile launcher or sniper. And once you've committed to the heavy machine guns, you have enough burst that, although it's totally fine to have +3 ballistic skill on the Fusilier and run the Kamau unlinked or do it or whatever, the fact that you can play this like just a little Toha list with the 2 3-person teams, maybe if the scenario is asking for your specialist to go in different locations, you want that flexibility, you can do that. And how I recommend deploying it is you can deploy them if you want to kind of in one place and just decide once you go to place your reserve how you'll link them. Alternatively, split them up, run them as 2 3-person teams. I think it's got a fair bit of potential, and it's cheap, particularly in terms of SWC, which opens up options elsewhere in the list. We then have a machines with a Palbot. We are running to Squalo. I kind of think you will probably just need this, not so much to restore wounds as to heal mobility kills. So if your opponent is able to Oblivion and Carbonite Squalos, they're relatively resistant to hacking, but a good hacker will get through, particularly with enough orders. Being able to just unbrick the Squalos, if your opponent goes after them that way, I think is kind of necessary. Just spend the 18 points. We then have our first of 3 helots. It's going to be in Combat Group 1, just so that I can convert its order regular for these troops if I want to. And all of the helots, I had the SWC in this list, so all of the helots are the cheapest submachine gun light rocket launcher. If you need to save SWC, upgunning the helots to the 13-point marksman rifle is totally fine. But if you have the SWC, the cheaper points generally are a better trade-off. In Combat Group 2, we then have our lone Fugazi Dronbot, a Squalo Mark II, that's the second Silhouette 6 tag. This one has a heavy machine gun and a grenade launcher +1 damage, and a multi-pistol +1 burst. So, if you've been paying attention, I've been talking about how Pan-Oceanian lists need to have some kind of way to engage with enemy asymmetric pieces, and I think for Varuna, particularly after my last game with Ed, my opinion is Zulu Cobras are one option, but if you don't take them, the natural home of the grenade launcher really does seem to be in Varuna. There are a couple of reasons why I think this is so. The first is just that Varuna lacks pieces like something you might see in other Pan-Ocean sectorals. So if we think about how other sectorals in Pan-Oceania have ways of dealing with asymmetric pieces, Svalaheimer can close assault with models like Lang Kai. Acontecimento has probably the best counter-skirmisher in the game in Dart and has mobility elements like the Tikbalang. And then Neoterra has Auxilla, which are just excellent, cheap, close assault elements, very cheap, like very effective for their cost. But Varuna doesn't have those, and so that leaves it reaching towards maybe more order inefficient choices like grenade launchers. But the more I think about it, the more I think that actually grenade launchers are a natural fit for Varuna, because the big fundamental strength of Varuna is that with availability 3 helots, it has outstanding, like frustrating, truly effective defensive pieces, a defensive entrenchment. And so it wants to play in a way that forces your opponent to waste themselves on your defensive elements. It wants to force the helots to be live, and engaging your opponents with spec fire from behind the helots is a really good way of forcing your opponent to come forward and engage with the helots. That kind of passive response where you, from the safety of your lines, you engage with the enemy asymmetric pieces, thus they must come forward and engage your asymmetric pieces, which are the helots, that I feel fits Varuna very well. And so we have the Squallow Mark II grenade launcher. Not a ton of regular orders in this combat group, but if need be, we can convert plenty of orders regular. We then have a Tech Bee. I've spoken in the past about how I think Tech Bees are excellent, and she fits very well into this combat group. And then 2 more helots, bringing us up to 3, both with submachine guns and light rocket launchers. Now, 3 helots and a Tech Bee means 4 irregulars. I am going to be... Well, actually, this game I'm not going to be converting their irregular orders regular that much, because I'm going to have other things that I desperately need my irregular orders for. Depossessing the Squallows. But the plan is, if need be, that particularly this combat group is going to have its helot orders converted, although I am hoping to spend at least some orders positioning the helots aggressively. So I, spoiler alert, had a great time playing this list. I really liked it, and I think it's leaning towards how I would play Varuna. Wouldn't necessarily always play double tag, but this is a double tag list I am happy to play. So Sneaky Snake, this is for you, this list is for you, but I enjoyed playing it, and it took me a while to think it out, but I enjoyed writing it as well. Let's see what we're playing against. So my opponent, Nick, is in the process of deciding what he wants to play for CanCon. He's been bouncing around between some Ariadnan factions, but on the possible list is White Company. And so this is not exactly a first draft White Company list, but it is Nick's running at White Company and sort of seeing what it is that he likes. The list is trying to be just a little bit clever, and we'll see why in a moment, but a lot of the core pieces are there. We're missing one faction-defining piece, which is the Kahu Feuerback. That doesn't show up in this list, and I think if he can just find some SWC, and he can, that would round this list out quite well. WhiteCo generally, you think of it partly as Pan-Oceania with smoke and hacking, but it makes sacrifices to get there. And the sacrifices that it makes is that it's light Pan-Oceania with smoke and hacking. It's light infantry. It's some heavy infantry. There's a dearth of heavy material in White Company. It's very different from Pan-Oceania in that respect. It has access to Guija as a tag, but there is a big difference between, in terms of supportability and use case, there's a big difference between Aguija and just about every Pan-Oceanian tag. If WhiteCo had something like a Stingray Silhouette 6 tag, it would actually probably just be better Pan-Oceania, but it doesn't, and that's what sets it apart. So light elements are the watchword of White Company, supported by smoke and hacking that Pano doesn't have access to. So we're beginning this list with a 4-person Fusilier Corps, 4-person just to get 6 cents. We have the obligatory, very powerful piece, just in terms of usefulness, the Hideout MSV2 Multi-Sniper. Yes, it's only BS12, it's in a 4-person core link, so it's only going to be BS12, but it's durable and it has MSV2. Some games it will just be just incredibly valuable, and so you take it for that reason. And it's cheap to support. We have a CSU Specialist Operative, a Fusilier, and a Fusilier Paramedic. You are unlikely to use the Paramedic on the Hideout because it's a no winning cap piece without particularly high fizz. It's an option, but you're unlikely to do it. But it's a specialist. This is just a useful link that has the option to move out if it needs to. We then have a 3-person link with Hawkwood, Kahu Paramedic, and Valyria Gromos. The Kahu is here because it's a specialist, admittedly low whip, and an NCO, so it sort of represents an extra order. Nick was of the opinion that he wanted this to be a specialist, but I think it's worth noting that you've already got Valyria. She's often going to be the specialist in the link. She's whip 14 as opposed to 12 on the Kahu. And Hawkwood is another piece that a paramedic just doesn't benefit that much. Yes, his fizz is not that bad, but he's a no wound incapacitation troop. You're just not likely to want to paramedic him because the cost of failure is killing a troop that was otherwise functional. So this list can afford to cut one SWC. We'll get to that in a second. This Kahu really should be a Kahu Fwereback. That rounds out this three-person Harry's very, very well with a good specialist, a good gun, and then another good gun slash close range element, etc. The reason why the extra XWC is being spent is we have a Danavis here and a Beast Hunter FTO, both excellent pieces, is we've got this Guilang Lieutenant. Now, this is Nick kind of being clever. Hawkwood is the only visible WIP 14 model. The Guilang is WIP 14 as a lieutenant, so the idea kind of is that Hawkwood baits people into attacking him because it looks like this is susceptible to loss of lieutenant. That is just not going to actually happen all that often, and it's not going to come up this game, for example. The Guilang Lieutenant is an interesting piece, but WhiteCo is 2 SWC salved to spend this 1 SWC on it. If you cut this Guilang Lieutenant, you just run a couple of Fusiliers, one of them is the LT, you just do that. That gives you points and SWC to do things like upgrade this Kahu to a Fwereback, and a Kahu Fwereback, provided it doesn't just get crit and die, just slaps. It's a superlatively powerful gunfighting piece, and this Guilang is just a little too janky, probably wants to be cut. Rounding out the list, we have Combat Group 2, and this is where the list finishes leaning into the smoke and hacking. So we've already seen 2 high-quality hackers in the list. Valerio Gromos is a solid WIP 14 hacker with a pitcher in a link. Danavis is an excellent hacker with Oblivion +1 burst and its own pitcher. And then we have a Guilang Mine Layer with boarding shotgun, shock mines, and disposable repeater. So it will often, for example, be the reserve drop. You can choose between mine laying a mine and a deployable repeater based on your opposing force. And in CanCon, where there are going to be a lot of exclusion zone scenarios, it will lose value, but you're incentivized to aggressively attempt to deploy it. Not super high fizz on a Guilang, but the payoff can be very high. And we have a Clipper Dronbot to pair with those high whip, particularly whip 15 Danavis hackers, 2 Varangian guards, 4 smoke, and Lang Kai. Lang Kai is magnificent, he's excellent. This entire combat group is basically money. The Guilang Mine Layer is very expensive, but I am more forgiving of it than other Guilang because it has a boarding shotgun. I would kind of love it if it just paid like a whole bunch of points less to not have the damn MSV1, but that is what it is. The kit is overall good. So I think this is, with the exception of the Guilang Lieutenant jank, I think this is just a well-rounded, very standard, very solid, well thought out WhiteCo list that is spending its sort of like luxury points on pieces that are very useful. You have good hacking, you have good network projection, and those are the things if Nick's guns fall behind, because he only has a couple of guns really. This list is undergunned, all things considered. If the guns fall behind, you can fall back on hacking and asymmetric, and that's one of White Company's strengths that sets it apart as a like Panashania Plus, just without the heavy material faction. So those are the 3 lists we're looking at today. Today we're playing Varuna versus WhiteCo. In last launch, let's look at the map and play the game. So we're playing some proper garage gaming today. Nick is testing out a table that he's interested in taking, or he will be taking to CanCon. It is a containerized, like container city style table. Looks lovely, probably won't be painted for CanCon, but I love the aesthetic. It's a proper like sort of futurism in a different way, sort of dystopian-esque, very nice. The terrain pieces were all quite playable. You can see a lot of ladders, for example, so a lot of accessibility around the tables and some good use of interiors. For terrain, we're going to be playing most interiors as accessible, although Nick has closed up the bottom levels of some terrain pieces. That's quite sensible. Usually you want to not let players pick terrain pieces apart, and if a player has to lift the top part of a building off to access the bottom, you're going to end up in fudged game states, sort of things going wrong. It's easy to have models knock around. So usually it's going to be sort of the highest visible level is going to be accessible, unless it's quite clear. So for example, this building here, you can easily see that the building is open and it's relatively easy to move around. Same here. If there is a window in place, the window will be played as a muddy window, so that is it blocks line of sight unless you're in contact, but a lot of the buildings will have quite open doors and areas. So for example, here you can see this is just an open space. It's neither a door nor a window. Models can just see and move through it clearly. And on this building here, we have a window that will block line of sight unless you're in contact, but then 2 just openings in the building that you can walk through if needed. In a rare change of pace, I have crit the lieutenant role, and I have elected to go first. Now, this is not necessarily conventional Varuna wisdom, but there are a couple of things that pushed me towards this decision. The first is These deployment zones specifically, but more generally, I was not confident in my ability to deploy helots perfectly. And if you're going to go second as Varuna, they're a faction that can excel from that position, but you have to have your helot deployments absolutely on point. Knowing that I wasn't sure I would be able to do that, and wanting to be somewhat aggressive with helots, the plan was I would just take deploying first, and I would use the helot irregular orders to push them forward into somewhat aggressive locations, redeploying them if needed in response to whatever Nick did. The second reason that I chose to go first is that I just don't think last launch is a particularly go second scenario. There is some very interesting tension in the scenario in terms of how it plays, where both players are robbing themselves of force as the game progresses, and it's nominally easier to do that if you're the second player. But the value of an alpha strike and establishing early table control, there is no, apart from the curious rhythm of the scenario, there is no specific scoring mechanic that incentivizes you to go second. There is only end of game scoring, and the bulk of that end of game scoring you can accomplish over the course of the game. So it's not really end of game scoring. For example, most specialists launched, most points launched, those are things you can accumulate over the course of the game. So Nick has picked the right table side. I've obviously deployed first. I've reserved my grenade launcher HMG score loss as it's the longest range one and unlinked. And how we've deployed is follows. So over here, you can't see it, but it's behind the building. We have the score loss multi-marksman here, duoed with the Knight of Montesa. A Tech Bee and a Helot are hanging out with them down here. We have the machinist hanging out near the Knight of Montesa, and his Palbot is down here near a Fugazi Dronbot that's just watching sort of like along this line here, but really it's not looking for a great deal of line of sight. We have our second helot here and our third helot here. These are all deployed in positions where if I don't move them, they will basically be fine, but where I am intending to move them at least somewhat over the course of the game. So for example, I'm hoping that this helot might come out and around this direction, and the helot that is deployed behind this building here is one move away from this position here, which I am pretty confident is quite good for the weapons it's using. I've then deployed basically all of my infantry over here, so I can decide after deployment whether or not I want them to be in 2 3-person teams or an unlinked Kamau and a 5-person Fusilier Corps. We have the Fusilier Lieutenant down here, the other Fusilier decoy on the ground floor of this building, our first paramedic here, our second paramedic here, and then the HMG up here. We are playing this as a ladder, just as an FYI, which is why this Fusilier is on this level rather than just immediately next to the Fusilier HMG, ready to revive him if needed. I'm then going to reserve drop my score loss with heavy machine gun here. That's in response to something that Nick will do with his deployment. So for Nick's deployment, he's deployed, forcing the issue, he's deployed his hideout HMG over here with the support pieces on ground level around behind it. We have an unlinked Varangian Guard here. There is a path underneath this building, but they're relatively narrow paths sort of underneath, so the Varangian Guard is relatively safely deployed. If it impetuouses aggressively, it will be seen by this Fusilier if it's standing, but for now the Varangian Guard is safe. The Clipper Dronbot is prone over here. The Beast Hunter is standing here with its mine deployed here. And an important note about this deployment is the Beast Hunter and the Hideowl are sort of pinning down this Fusilier. The Fusilier, if it stands, will be seen by both, although the Fusilier would have the Beast Hunter out of cover. But if the Fusilier just stays prone and crawls along to there, or prone and crawls along to here, would potentially have either of them sliced individually. We then have the Hawkwood Harris over here. We have the Kahu. Gromos is at ground level in this building, and Hawkwood is standing. Now, Hawkwood is standing because, as I've deployed, there weren't really any long-range guns in this space, and so Hawkwood has deployed to kind of watch this line with his marksman rifle, and he'll have good range against anything engaging from here, or even here. The problem is I've then reserve dropped my score loss HMG, and that's going to be in a position where it will be able to just move in one action and get a bead on Hawkwood from outside his optimal range. Nick has responded with a reserve drop of his own, and it's a camouflage marker and a deployable repeater, and my testicles recede into my body somewhat as he attempts to place the deployable repeater here. Now, this is a weakness of how I have chosen to deploy. I have like 150 points of hackable stuff all concentrated in one repeater area. If that had landed, it would have been a very spicy game because it would have been difficult for me to maybe say shoot the deployable repeater from this rooftop. There just wouldn't have been line of sight. I'd have to go after it probably with a helot, and that can take a real long time because helots are burst 1 in active turn. But Nick did not roll the requisite, I want to say 8 to land, and so the Guilang has just ended up down here. I think if this had not been an exclusion zone scenario, you would have just placed the repeater probably in this building here, where it would have comfortably pinched off that space, but it's an exclusion zone scenario. Last launch wouldn't have had the launch tower if we weren't playing last launch, so it wouldn't have been exclusion zone. But just if it was this kind of map, I think this here would have been the logical place for a repeater. So I can breathe a sigh of relief. We're off to a good start with a crit lieutenant roll and the infiltration roll of the Guilang failing. We move on into first turn. So first turn, we are playing Pan-Oceania, which means we are looking to establish firepower dominance. We are looking to engage and destroy, if possible, enemy-heavy elements so that we can have the run of the board. And it's the humble Fusilier HMG that is going to do the first half of this heavy lifting. It's going to stay prone and crawl along here. I have my choice of engaging the Beast Hunter or the Hideout first. And although the face-to-face roll against the Hideout is better, engaging against the Beast Hunter is better, engaging the Hideout is more important. So I gird my loins. Look, I'm an 18-point model. If I die, it isn't the end of the world. And I move around and I engage the Hideout, burst 5 on 15s, do burst 2 on 12s. I win the face-to-face roll and do a wound. The Hideout has nowhere it can go. I take the face-to-face roll again and I destroy the Hideout. Then I take a third order and I stand, which brings me into line of fire of the Beast Hunter. And this is a very favorable face-to-face roll. I have it out of cover. It has Mimetism, burst 5 on 15s to burst 1 on 11s, and I put it down as well. So immediately, that's the 2 hard ARO pieces taken down in a comfortable 3 orders. We then spool up the Scoreless HMG, move around the corner here, and the first face-to-face roll, Hawkwood wounds me. Hawkwood wins the face-to-face roll. I roll like R5, and he rolls R6, and I miss everything else. So we have 1 wound on the Scoreless, but the second face-to-face roll, Hawkwood misses both of his shots. Unsurprising, it's bad range and cover, and I hit crit and annihilate him. This is a thing that can happen to WhiteCo. Hawkwood is one of the tougher pieces in the list, and he's still just a no wound incapacitation medium infantry, so down he goes. And with Hawkwood, the Beast Hunter, and the Hideout down, that's basically every gun over 16-inch range. Nick is going to have to fall back on hacking, asymmetric warfare, guided missiles, stuff like that, to pull this game out. That's the bulk of the face-to-face rolls that I can make this turn. But I still have plenty of orders, and so we're going to begin developing the board. That's going to take the form of moving some helots up and around, so I believe this helot is probably going to end up over here by the end of this turn. The helot behind this building will move up here as foreshadowed. This helot over here is going to move forward and develop its position as well. But we're going to use our remaining tactical awareness and regular orders to move up with the Squalos Montesa duo. So they will move up and around here. The Montesa there's a console back here. The Montesa will pick up an ID. He will pull backwards and the Squalos will push forward. And so the Montesa will end its order over here in cover. The Squalos will end. There's a little gap in the chain link fence with a ammo crate. The Squalos will move up to there, and it will engage and destroy a Varangian guard hanging out back there. That's the last casualty that I will score this turn, but it will put me at 4 models dead in the first turn, which include both of the primary guns in the list. So that's an excellent first turn. It's really that's a pretty much ideal first turn. I've even managed a little bit of scenario mileage. Nick has to, because he's on relatively limited firepower now, he has to play asymmetrically to win. He would be in a much better position if he had, say, a Kahu Fwereback, because the Kahu Fwereback would be able to potentially engage and destroy, and therefore threaten me back both tags. I would have had to have spent orders pulling away, making myself safe, not presenting as hard ARO pieces, because the Kahu Fwereback, even unlinked, is a threat to every hard gun I would put out. I'd have to fall back behind the helots. So Nick and I workshop his turn out, and what we come to is a hacker-based attack. And I quite like how Nick chooses to execute it. I provide some suggestions sort of at the end in terms of optimization, but this is a fun play. So the Denavis hanging out here is she can't just push her face against the window. The Squalos HMG will see her, but she can stand and just draw a line of fire down to here, and she pots a repeater down in this area there. So with that done, Valeria Gromos then spools up Burst 2 Total Control, and in one go engages and possesses the Squalos with the multi-rifle. Squallers Mark II are quite hacking susceptible. The only ECM they have is against ECM guided, so they're just Whip 12, they're just BTS 6, very easy to possess, and sure enough, first go, Gromos possesses this Squallos. She then goes on a little bit of a run with it, she moves it out and around this way, she's firing the pistols, attempting to put down the Knight of Montesa, and engage the Tech B over here. I don't reveal the Helot because I don't want to kill my own tag, and she's able to wound the Knight of Montesa before the Tech B actually wins a face-to-face roll and stun the Squallos. Okay, that's fine, job done. What then we do is, what I do is I run Nick through a tactic for attempting to neutralize a tag under these circumstances, where you've possessed it and you've done some work, but there's not really any more that you can do. And I don't normally name tactics, but in this case, this is what I would call a cordyceps strategy. And so to cordyceps a tag, what you do is you possess it, and then you climb it onto a wall inside repeater area. You want to leave it in a climbing position because a climbing model is functionally helpless. There is, unless it has climbing plus, which a Squalloss doesn't, there is really nothing that it can do other than attempt to climb down. It's effectively defenseless, and if your opponent repossesses it and then attempts to climb down, unless they've cleared that repeater, you have a totally free possession attempt, in this case burst 2, because there are the 2 hackers that can possess it, to take it back. It very effectively neutralizes the tag. So we'll see a picture of this at the end of this turn, but the Squalloss Mark II is going to end up hanging onto this chain link fence, possessed inside repeater area. At this point, Nick has just a few orders left, and he needs to get the Danavis back into cover anyway. So as a little bit of a Hail Mary, he just peeks at it like basically from his standing position, drops prone, and he has line of fire down to, not exactly to see this Squalloss, but just onto the ground. It's like something like there. And this is within 24, so it's at -3 range for the Danavis pitcher. Just rolls it, and this time he does roll the 8, and he lands a pitcher down next to the Squalloss. Now he's quite short on orders. All he can do is use O12 Prestige to generate an order for Valyria Gromos, and he has the choice here between possessing and like attempting to Oblivion the tag or the helper bot that's moved up behind it. If you had unlimited orders, this would be where you go for a mobility kill. So you Oblivion the helper bot, you Oblivion the tag, and you Carbonite the tag. At that point, the only way to recover it is to move the Machinist all the way over because the helper bot is bricked, it's been Oblivioned. But Nick only has the one order. He could attempt to Oblivion both of them, but he can total control instead. And it has very high success chance because Gromos is burst 2 total control, and it's very powerful damage ammunition, burst 2, double action, damage 16. And what he can do here is just aggressively stress my command token usage. If I have to spend 2 command tokens taking back tags on my second turn, the odds that I will have to spend no more command tokens for the rest of the game in order to have the capacity to repossess those same tags in turn 3, which means he's limiting my ability to convert heal orders, etc. So he goes for this instead, mostly off the back of the fact that it's higher odds, and he successfully possesses this Squalloss as well, which means that I have ended my turn with 2 Squallosses possessed, both of them inside repeater areas, just generally dealing with like, the old asymmetric warfare is in full play against my Panosianians. However, I have sustained no casualties, which means that we are broadly still in a very good position. So here is the obligatory shot of the completely rooted Squalloss. You can't see it in this picture, but literally down here behind the chain link fence is the repeater. And so the Squalloss is just clinging there hopelessly, waiting to be taken control back and then possessed and then taken control back. The only other thing of note that happened during next turn that I didn't cover before is that a Varangian Guard did attempt to come on a run, and after a couple of orders, the Helot engaged and destroyed him. So Nick is now down, I want to say, something like 5 pieces. I have to unpick what he's done in terms of all of his repeater stuff. So we have this 5-person Fusilier Corps. The first thing we do is we depossess both tags. Then we move Fusiliers out and around. We take some long-range combi shots because it's the most efficient way to engage this. And we engage and destroy this repeater before safely nooking, this is our lieutenant if you'll recall, the lieutenant back under the sort of cover of this building. I have repossessed this tag using a command token, mostly just for the order, but I don't have any great intention of doing anything with him because there is still this repeater there. However, look, we have some orders, let's go for it. I've put these pieces in this list for a reason, so we roll up with the grenade launcher. The grenade launcher has positioned itself, it's already in okay range, and it fires, it's got just a few orders to spend, and it fires a grenade, spec fire, over and donk there, and yep, first order, it manages to take out the repeater. That's what it's for. It's not like the repeater can dodge. I need to roll 9s to hit, and then it's damage 15 on the +1 damage grenade launcher. So we clear out the repeater. Excellent. Okay, cool. We can now get this tag down off of the damn fence, spending a sack awareness order and getting away. We have some orders left in the second combat group, so we'll fire a grenade again, and we land this one on the Denavus, just able to get in range, and we kill her as well. So we're 2 for 2. Thoroughly, this is confirmation bias. I rolled very well to get those 2 kills in 2 orders, but thoroughly justifying, I feel, the decision to put that grenade launcher in the list. At this juncture, I feel that I am ahead enough that I can start playing to the scenario. You'll recall that on the last turn, the motorcycle Montesa pulled out. It's been wounded, but it's pulled out an ID. The Squalus is going to run past the Montesa, taking the ID along the way, then get to the last launch platform and evacuate. I am doing this partly because I just don't want to deal with another Herna getting possessed. The Squalus has done its work. It's absorbed a ton of orders. If the thing gets possessed again inside repeater area, I'm just not necessarily going to have the resources to deal with it. So we are going to yeet it into space, and then the Montesa, with the remaining orders in the pool, is going to drive back to the beacon, get another ID, and then drive around and yeet off into space as well. So at that juncture, I've got a 57-point model, a 29-point model, one of which is a specialist, all evacuated. Frankly, that is probably more points than Nick has left on the table at this juncture. So we are obviously in a pretty good shape. The only remaining thing I do is I've got 1 regular order left in the second combat group, and we're going to use that to move this Squalus forward, just sort of positioned here. And this is mostly just to lock Nick away from the objective room and the beacon. I want him to not be able to play the scenario. Now, as Nick rolls into his turn, the Squalus is going to pay for being used that aggressively, because this Kamau is going to come sort of like up and over here, and then sneakily crawl down and around, mostly while prone, come out and engage the Squalus within 16 inches. The 16-inch fight is very favorable for the Kamau, for the Kahu. It's a multi-rifle BS-13 Nemetism engaging inside 16 against just a generic HMG. And so it takes something like 4 orders, but in 4 orders he puts the Squalo all the way down, not quite to dead, but very, very close to. There's not a ton left that Nick can do. He takes a bunch of face-to-face rolls. This Link attempts to move up and around and literally just take combi rifle engagements with the Helot and the Fusilier, but it's not going to go well for it, and he loses a couple of pieces attempting to do that. Finally, the Clipper stands up. It actually has a good face-to-face roll. It's engaging this Fusilier HMG at something like 37 inches. This is actually a really good face-to-face roll, and the Clipper is rewarded. It puts a missile into the Fusilier, who's at bad range cover, and puts the Fusilier all the way down to dead. That's about all Nick can do, though. He's not up on scenario. That's sort of his attempt at a counterattack. He's not able to be as successful as it was in his first turn. So rolling through turn 3, mostly what we need to do is just kind of deliver the coup de grace. We'll spend one of our few remaining command tokens to form this team up into a 5-person link. They're going to come up and around. Along the way, we are going to attempt to take another thing out of the beacon, but we don't have enough orders to try it multiple times. Doesn't get it, that's okay. Around this way, the Kamau HMG will engage and destroy the Clipper, and then they'll just sort of like pile into the room. None of them are going to get evacuated, but they're going to flood the room with disposable combi rifles and the Kamau. The Kamau will also move around to here, engage the Kahu at about 18 inches and destroy it. Everything else this turn is just, we don't have much left. We threw a bunch of stuff into space last turn. It's just going to be the Helots all converging on the objective room in order to defend it. So by the end of this turn, frankly, Nick has got no gas left in the tank, and the objective room is covered by 4 Fusiliers, 2 still camouflaged Helots, and the Kamau. So there's really not much they can do. Nick is happy to concede at that point, and fair enough, which gives us, I think I'm also securing the HVT thanks to this Helot. That puts us on either a 10-1, I don't remember what Nick's classified was, it's either a 10-1 or a 10-0 win to Varuna. So a decisive result, and one I think that got to showcase all of the strength I wanted the list to have. The grenade launcher was decisive. The ability to carry 4 big guns in the list. By the end of the game, I only had the 1, but it was still fighting. I was still taking powerful face-to-face rolls by the end of the game. At that point, the Kamau was fully linked and was rolling 5 dice on 14s with Mimetism. The list was tough. It had the full Helot complement. If anything, the Helots were probably the only thing that didn't need to do that much. And in a game that had swung against me, having those multiple Helots to fall back on, I think would have been very, very useful. So broadly, this has been probably the most fun I've had playing Panashania in some time. This list got to do a lot of things that really just Varuna uniquely can do, combining heavy material with one SWC guns in particular in Varuna is a notable strength, with, of course, Helots. Wonderful fish person, truly the apex species of the entire Varuna, the entire Infinity universe is the indigenous species of Varuna. So that concludes this battle report. Sneaky Snake, I hope you enjoyed this. Ethan from the UK, I hope you enjoyed the discussion of the Tikbalang. For people, if you're watching this, if you enjoyed what I do, you can support me via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. I am likely also soon to turn on channel memberships as we are approaching 2,000 subscribers. Otherwise, as always, look, please do support the channel. It means a great deal. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.